Some names echo through the centuries, others linger like spells. Solomon is both. You might search for him in the pages of the Bible, in ancient genealogies, in the grand columns of the temple. But you won't truly find him there, Solomon. Doesn't live where history resides. He breathes in the space between myth and memory, where faith becomes code and language becomes a tool for shaping reality. He was not merely a king, he was a magician of the word, an operator of the invisible, a master who held the unpronounceable name of God in his hand and sealed entities with spoken symbols. He built a temple not just for worship, but as a doorway between worlds. The Solomon we're speaking of isn't the one taught in Sunday schools, but the one whispered about in hidden corners of the yeshivas, interpreted by Sufis as the master of jinn, seen in Arabic texts, commanding the winds and spirits. He appears in Hermetic grimoires, in Hebrew alchemical texts, not as a ruler of men, but as a ruler of forces, one who used sacred geometry as a spell, and the word as a blade. They say God wrote the universe with letters of fire, but when Solomon raised the temple, he translated that fire into stone. The Temple of Solomon was not merely a building, it was a multi-dimensional machina mirror of the cosmos, a ritual tool constructed from sacred proportion aligned with the divine. To the untrained eye, it may look like an architectural achievement. To initiates, it is a vibrational code. The 22 Hebrew letters, each containing a specific energy, were embedded into its very measurements. Solomon built the temple using not only stone and gold, but symbols and sacred names, invoking rather than constructing, the Holy of Holies. The innermost sanctuary was a perfect cube, 20 cubits in each direction. In esoteric language, the cube represents earth and balance, the stable plane where the divine may descend. It is the embodiment of equilibrium, in order the cube of the adept who has overcome inner chaos. Gershom Scholem, the foremost scholar of Jewish mysticism, called the temple the physical incarnation of the tree of life. Each chamber, each object, each veil aligned with a sephira, a divine emanation. To walk through the temple was to journey through creation itself, from Malkuth to Kether, from matter to spirit, and Solomon didn't build alone. According to the Book of Kings, he was helped by Hiram, a Biff, got craftsman from Tyre. But to mystics, Hiram was more than a builder. Was an initiate, a keeper of arcane fire, a symbol of the unity between pagan knowledge and Hebrew revelation. This collaboration hints at the fusion of lost traditions, a wisdom we no longer see as one. But where did Solomon get the plans for the temple? The Bible says God gave them. Gnostic and apocryphal texts tell a different tale. The Testament of Solomon, a mystical text from the early centuries AD, claims that Solomon learned his secrets from demons, spirits of the underworld summoned and bound with a ring given to him by an angel. With this ring, engraved with the 72-fold name of God, he compelled invisible beings to raise the stones of the temple. To the religious, this is disturbing. To the initiated, it is truth. Light comes from mastering the dark. The temple is built not with purity, but with integration chaos ordered by the word. These spirits, 72 in number, later became the demons of the Ars Godia. But in Solomon's tradition, they were forces of nature and reflections of human psyche. Each one with its own role. Some heal, some deceive, some teach, some destroy, but all are pieces of a greater puzzle. They are not to be feared. They are to be understood, interrogated, mastered. Solomon didn't destroy them. He conversed with them. He wanted to know their purpose, their element, their star. This is not exorcism, it is alchemy. The 72 names of God, derived from 3 cryptic verses in Exodus, form a kind of cosmic alphabet. Combined, they are a vibrational system, a set of divine frequencies. Engraved on Solomon's ring, they represent the power to bridge heaven and earth. This ring is not just an object, it is a symbol of perfect will, guided by sacred knowledge. The circle of will, the sword of word. Those who bear it walk between heaven and hell, without fear, because they understand both. The ring. The name and the spirits form a triad. Name is vibration, ring is focus, spirit is force. If one is missing, the structure collapses. With all. 3. One builds worlds. Solomon's power was not in domination, but in orchestration. He brought order to what was wild. He brought language to what was formless. This wisdom is echoed in Freemasonry, where the Temple of Solomon is not a building, but a state of consciousness. Freemasons don't build with brick, but with symbol. They reconstruct the temple within, chamber by chamber, ritual by ritual. The temple never ended. It lives in the seeker. Every degree is a step through a symbolic labyrinth, where every door is a challenge, every emblem a key. At its center is silence because the Holy of Holies was empty. No statue, no flame, no throne, only space. And in that sacred void hovered the Shekinah, the divine presence that cannot be captured or named. In Islamic tradition, Suleiman or Suleiman is also a prophet. The Quran tells how he commanded birds, jinn, and winds. Spirits built his palaces. But when he died, leaning on his staff, no one knew until the worms ate through the wood and his body fell. The jinn, unaware of his death, had obeyed the illusion of power. This is the final symbol. True power is not the gesture, but the seal, silent, invisible, aligned with the real. Solomon is more than a biblical figure. He is the Magus Regis, the Mage King. He is the archetype of the one who enters chaos not to be destroyed, but to rule from within. His wisdom wasn't cleverness, it was Chokmedivine fire. Wisdom sat beside God's throne as a living feminine force, and Solomon loved her more than crown or kingdom. But wisdom cuts deep. Ecclesiastes says, with much knowledge comes much sorrow. Solomon knew too much. He saw the currents beneath reality, heard the language of birds, understood the dreams of nations, and was burdened by this knowledge. And that is the secret. The demons Solomon mastered were not only spirits of the outside world, they were his own inner shadows. His real temple wasn't built in Jerusalem, it was built inside, stone by symbolic stone, in the labyrinth of the soul. This is not nihilism, it is an initiatory diagnosis. Those who see too much inevitably see the void. Those who perceive the gears behind the world also recognize that they turn upon impermanent, fragile axes. Those who hear the logos cannot help but also hear the echo of the abyss. The Solomon of Ecclesiastes is no longer the triumphant monarch, he is the weary initiate, the one who, after ascending the heights of knowledge, returns only to say, everything is vanity. In Hebrew, the word is hevel mist, vapor, a thing that slips between the fingers. To Solomon, reality is fleeting, a puppet theater whose strings are too visible. And in that brutal clarity, there is not triumph, but a certain sacred melancholy. Harold Bloom, both critic and informal Kabbalist, once remarked that Solomon might be the first literary figure of the divided self, a man torn between supreme lucidity and the burden that lucidity brings. That same inner fracture reappears in later Kabbalistic writings. In the Sefer HaBahir, wisdom is said to be a tree that only blooms when its roots are sunk in non-being. True wisdom, it teaches, is to know that you do not know. And Solomon embodies this paradox completely. The greatest of sages, and for that very reason, the most confused of men. He understood the laws of heaven, yet remained baffled by his own heart. This is not merely philosophical speculation. It's written into his very life. The same man who spoke of fidelity to wisdom was the one who lost himself among 700 wives and 300 concubines. Not as a hedonist, but as a seeker one, looking for something not even 1,000 bodies could give. The total understanding of the feminine, the eternal mystery. In religious texts, these women are described as snares. But in esoteric tradition, they are seen as archetypes, facets of the soul, expressions of Sophia, the divine feminine. Each one represents a mystery Solomon tried to integrate and could not. It is the eternal dance between the feminine and the logos endless. Fascinating, unresolved in Islamic mystical traditions. Solomon Suleiman is known as Al-Hakim, the wise, but his wisdom becomes his test. It is said that his arrogance, born of too much knowledge, caused him to lose the throne temporarily to a jinn who took on his form. In Lithuanian Kabbalah, he is described as the master of the middle gate, the one who knew both the light and the shadow, and therefore belonged fully to neither. He crossed through both realms. But those who cross too many portals risk forgetting the way back. That's where Solomon becomes a mirror, because every true seeker, at some point, arrives at the threshold between logos and delirium, between revelation and dissolution. The secret is not to avoid this threshold, but to remain lucid within it. Osho once said that wisdom is like the sky. It allows all clouds to pass, but never mistakes itself for any of them. Solomon, at his best, was that sky. But at other times, he lost himself in the clouds of his own mind. It's no coincidence that his ring, the very one that sealed spirits and commanded forces, was also a symbol of ego made sacred, of self, mastered and contained. Only one who has tamed the self can endure the intensity of revelation. Only one who has learned silence can speak with true authority. Solomon spoke to heaven, but he also listened to the abyss. His wisdom was both crown and burden. And that is the ultimate truth of the mystical path. There is no light without shadow. The price of seeing clearly is to see not only beauty, but also futility and still choose to love. Though King Solomon died millennia ago, his image is not faded, is multiplied. With each passing age, Solomon is reborn as an archetype of the initiate, the architect of the soul, the sovereign magician. In the Hermetic tradition, he is no longer simply a biblical figure. He becomes a universal symbol, the spirit that deciphers the inner architecture of reality and shapes matter according to divine proportion. He is the one who reveals the hidden keys that elevate the soul, or, when misused, snare it. To truly understand how this mystical Solomon was forged, one must trace the currents of esoteric history through grimoires, secret orders, monastic libraries, and the hidden labs of alchemists. In Freemasonry, Solomon stands as the ideal builder, the one who organizes chaos through sacred geometry. In medieval grimoires, he takes on an even more powerful face, not as ruler, but as supreme magician. In texts like the Clavicula Salomonis, the Keys of Solomon, he is shown commanding angels, drawing seals, crafting talismans, and invoking spirits. The instructions are exact: what metals to use, on which day, under which planet, and with which prayers. This is not superstition, it is ritualized metaphysics. It's a complete hermetic framework built on the principle that what is above reflects what is below. Later, in the Lemmicaton or Lesser Key of Solomon, the 72 spirits of the Gotia appeared, with names, symbols, ranks, and purposes. These spirits were said to be bound by Solomon in vessels of bronze and sealed with his ring. The grimoires claim that those who follow the rites precisely may summon these same intelligences for healing, wisdom, or protection. But their deeper teaching is not domination, it is self-mastery. The spirits are projections, the rituals are trials. Each one is a confrontation with a part of yourself. In Kabbalah, Solomon becomes the bearer of Dot, the hidden Sephira, the unifying principle that bridges duality. His name, Shlomo, relates to Shalom, wholeness. He represents the tension between opposites, light and shadow, creation and destruction. In the schools of Isaac Luria, Solomon is even seen as a kind of Chaddock, a righteous pillar holding up the inner universe. But even the Tazak has a crack. Even he bleeds from the wound that comes with too much knowing in Sufi tradition. Solomon is invoked as the soul who has mastered the elements wind, water, fire, and earth. He speaks with animals, with jinn, with the silence between stars. In Christian Gnostic texts, he appears as a figure of deep gnosis, one who glimpsed heaven but fell into the entanglements of the world. And it is this dual nature that makes him truly enduring, not because he was flawless, but because he fell and still remains sacred. Solomon does not represent perfection. He represents the initiate who stumbles, who is tempted, who forgets but who keeps building. He is not above us, he is in us. In Rosicrucian orders and the rituals of modern magicians, In the silent studies of mystics and alchemists, he lives on. Not as legend, but as symbol. Not as king, but as Mira. And if these words stirred something in you, if they touched a space deeper than intellect, then you too are walking the path. Share this with someone who's ready to cross the veil. To leave your seal in the comments. If your heart resonates, because as Solomon once said, there's a time to be silent and a time to speak. Now it's your turn.